Hi, I'm Lee,
And I'm Brandon.
and this is That's What He Said, a show where two self-proclaimed football geniuses tell you how it is and how it was. Let's get right started, Brandon.
Let's get right to it. So, a great weekend of college football again. We start out Auburn and Arkansas. Arkansas heading down to Jordan-Hare to take on Auburn. Auburn a 34-3 winner. We predicted that.
That was difficult.
That was difficult. Again, Arkansas struggling to find any kind of balance on offense, running game, quarterback. Defense obviously not where they want it at this moment. Auburn, another steady performance. Coming back off of the loss to LSU. So good to see them bounce back.
Yeah, and I'm beginning to wonder if Arkansas's recruiting really has been as bad as a lot of people said that it was.
Right.
I thought that they had recruited better, and it doesn't look like that they have really what they need right now for that system. But I guess we'll see.
That's right. Moving forward, the team that took on Auburn a week and a half ago, LSU gets a 38-21 winner over Louisiana Tech. LSU never shut the door in this game at all. Allowed Louisiana Tech to hang around. Another good day on the offensive side for LSU. Defensively, are you a little worried? 21 points from Louisiana Tech.
A little sloppy, They were mailing it in a little bit, Might have been looking ahead to this week's game.
This week's game, definitely. Moving on, Mississippi State heads to the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Kentucky gets it done. We both picked that.
Yeah, that's
we
right.
both
That's
picked
right.
that.
Okay.
We both picked that 28-7 winner over
SPG.
Mississippi State. Benny Snell, another solid performance. The defense obviously played great. Nick Fitzgerald comes in. Mississippi State not able to get a whole lot done.
Now, do you think that's more of a reflection on Mississippi State being in basically a weak position as far as their team, maybe not moving in the right direction, or do you think that's more of just that Kentucky is really improved as a system over
I
the
think
last...
Kentucky, as an overall, much better team. Benny Snell, we talk about him every week. Benny Snell continues to just build on his performances each week. That offense is in tune right now. They're a team that literally can line up, say, hey, we're running the ball through that gap right there. Come stop us if you want to. And they're able to do it. And as long as they continue to have that, this Kentucky team, like we've talked about, is going to have a chance at making a run in the SEC East.
So we are in week 5, is that right?
Going into week 5, yep.
So have you ever said 5-0 Kentucky? Has that ever come out of your mouth?
It has never come out of my mouth. The closest team I could think of is the 2007 team with Andre Woodson at quarterback. All the weapons that he had. It took a 4 overtime game against Tennessee in the last regular season game, and the winner of that went to Atlanta. So that was the year they ended up in the Music City Bowl, where they defeated Florida State. Probably their best team that they've had since then.
Yeah, and we're going to be talking about whether or not we're going to see a 5-0 Kentucky here in a little bit.
I don't know why this popped up. I don't know how to get rid of it. It won't go away. Okay.
That's what she said.
Moving on, South Carolina makes the trip to Nashville. South Carolina with a very convincing 37-14 win. We differed on this pick.
I went
obviously.
out on a limb there.
Went on a pick, but the spread on the game was only 2.5 points.
Yeah.
So obviously, odds makers saw it as Vanderbilt's hot right now. We've talked about Derek Mason. We've talked about Kyle Sherman. We've talked about Kalijah Lipscomb, the great running backs that they've got and everything, and how Vanderbilt is in the upward trend. And their defense has continually been great. Was it more that they ran into a wall of what we said South Carolina could be, or did Vanderbilt just kind of implode?
I think it was depth. You're looking at South Carolina, more of a traditional powerhouse SEC type of team, more of an old-fashioned, bigger SEC team. And Vanderbilt's probably going to be 1 or 2 deep, whereas South Carolina is going to be 3 and 4 deep as far as just being able to compete on every snap against whoever they're up against. And so I think Vanderbilt just got worn down early. I think Vanderbilt's still headed in the right direction. I think that basically they are in situations where they have to be more on their game to be able to compete with these types of teams. And when they're a little bit off, I think it affects them more than the powerhouse teams who can have a bad game and still come away with a victory. Right. I think if Vanderbilt's not in tune and sync and striking while things are hot early, then they're going to be more in a position to lose, and the percentages are not with them.
Right.
So I think that's what happened. I think that just percentages caught up with them. They weren't in sync early, and South Carolina just wore them down.
So South Carolina right now with one SEC loss, are they still a voice to be reckoned with in the SEC East?
I think that they proved that even though it was Vanderbilt that they went through, they looked good against Vanderbilt, and they did what they were supposed to do. And
Jake Bentley, very solid game.
Right.
The South Carolina defense
Surprised me.
rising up again.
Yeah, I have to eat a little bit of humble pie here. I missed it. I think South Carolina is a better team than I thought they were so
Right.
far.
Well, good deal. Moving on, Texas A&M makes the trip north to Bryant-Denny and Tuscaloosa. Alabama continues to roll with a 45-23 victory. The spread on this game, 28.5. Finally, Bama doesn't score 50 points. Finally, Bama doesn't cover a spread. Texas A&M, I think, threw the kitchen sink at them, everything that they had, and again, just not enough. Am I wrong, or did Alabama score on the first play of the game again?
Yes, they did.
Interesting.
Yes, they did. Yeah, as we've said before, Alabama is really very good. Alabama's a great team, and it's going to be difficult for anybody to stop them at this point because every position they're going to be better than who they're facing.
Just their overall depth.
Yeah, it's an unbelievable amount of depth. It's an unbelievable amount of quality from the bottom to the top of the program. And these guys mentally at this point, they've been trained to dominate.
Right.
So are they invincible? No, but they are really good. And it's exciting if you're an Alabama fan. It's not if you're facing them, but pride goes before a fall. So we're going to see if Coach Saban can keep these guys humble with a number one ranking and having these big spreads, being favored by such large amounts every game.
Right.
You see that as a college kid, 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old kid, that you're favored by 50 points, which I believe is the spread this week. Is that right? Or 40?
Started out the week at 50, now down to 48.
Yeah, and to see that, you kind of just think, man, all we have to do is show up. But that's assuming you don't just show up. That's assuming you show up and play ball like you've been coached to play, and you keep playing at the level that you have. And so if they start getting lukewarm in their approach, if they start thinking they can just show up, we saw what happens a few years ago when an Alabama team thought they could just show up, and Ole Miss beat them all over the place. So they're not invincible, and I hope that Coach Saban, as an Alabama fan, I hope that Coach Saban can keep them motivated and showing up like they have to prove something instead of showing up like they just think that it's going to be handed to them. So I see that as the only downside to Alabama not winning another national championship, is that they start thinking that success is just something they show up for because they're Alabama. So we'll see what happens there.
Interestingly enough, we've talked about the trio, if not, the number of running backs that Alabama plays each and every week. 8 different receivers catch a pass for Alabama this week. Tua and Jalen both very comfortable, obviously, with every receiver.
Yeah, and of course, one stands out, and we like to talk about him.
Jerry Jeudy. He didn't have a touchdown catch this week, though.
Boy, he got close several times, though.
6 catches, 78 yards, another great game from Jerry Jeudy. Didn't get in the end zone this time, but that group of receivers that Alabama has, just how deep they are at that position. Obviously, a good thing to have in season, but a great thing moving forward.
Yeah, it is. When you have interchangeable receivers and the defense is going to see tape and they're going to be told, a lot of times there's going to be 2 big-time receivers where they're in the field. A lot of times you're going to see if you can get 2 guys glued in and focusing on these 2 guys or one guy. In this case, it almost seemed like when they would substitute even with receivers, I didn't even know who they were.
Right.
And then he'd come up with a big catch, and the look on the defense's face a lot of times was like, I don't even know who this guy is. Who is this guy? He's so athletic. He's making these acrobatic catches, and they probably haven't even seen him on tape. So it's an odd thing to have that kind of depth, but Alabama seems to have it. And A&M's a better team than they looked. I mean, a lot of times A&M looked like they were confused. They looked like they were outmanned, pushed around.
Right.
Like Alabama just imposed their will. So I think A&M is a better team than they showed, and I think Alabama has got to stay humble.
Moving on, Georgia heads to Columbia, Missouri to take on the Tigers of Missouri. Georgia escapes with a 43-29 game. This game much closer than what odds makers had predicted it to be.
Yeah, I do feel like the game was more out of hand, that Georgia was better by more than the score showed. Like maybe there was it was more of a victory and not as close as the score showed.
Right.
I did feel like Drew Lock played a really good game against one of the top 5 defenses in the country easily.
Absolutely.
And that, it was more of a case of South Carolina versus Kentucky in terms of just at every position. Georgia was going to be 3 and 4 deep, and Missouri just can't say that yet. I mean, to be able to stack up against an elite program like Georgia, Missouri's just not there yet. Maybe the starters, maybe too deep. Beyond that, they're not going to be able to give guys breathers, and they're going to get tired. And if they do sub with 3s and 4s against Georgia's 2s or 3s or 4s, it's just not going to end well. And so Georgia just wore them down and pulled away like an elite team would do. And it didn't look like Georgia had to sweat that much to do it. I think that's why it's a little deceptive. I don't think Missouri was as close as the score indicated.
Jake Fromm with a quiet day. He did have 3 touchdown passes, but the defense was really the story for Georgia Saturday. Jake Fromm, a steady game, a good game. Did not have a touchdown pass, though, opposed to 1 interception. So, as far as their drives go, they were able to move the ball in Georgia defense. Can't kick field goals against teams like that, though. Obviously something they need to look at more going forward. Moving on, Kent State heads to Ole Miss down to Oxford.
Yeah.
Oh, God, this is great. I love it. 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 Oh, man. You got to save some of these blooper stuff. Moving on, Kent State heads down to Oxford to take on Ole Miss and the Rebels. 38-17 win from Ole Miss, much closer than everyone would have expected.
Ole Miss
is there a little bit of a post-Alabama hangover?
Yeah, and Ole Miss was down early, weren't they?
Yes.
I believe they were. And, yeah, I think it's exactly that. A post-Alabama hangover. They've lost the first game that they've lost of the season. And sometimes, especially when you're an SEC team, you look for that elusive, undefeated season. And maybe they begin to doubt themselves a little bit. Are they embarrassed because of what happened in that game? And so they show up to a team they should beat. Where's the motivation?
Right.
That's probably what was going on there.
Right.
But they were able to pull it out. They kind of seemed to come together there toward the end of their credit and put it together and do what they need to do. So I think good things are still in store for Ole Miss. They do obviously have a defense that needs some work. But offensively,
number one goal, escape with a win.
Yep.
And they were able to do that.
The W, yep.
Good deal. Moving on to our last game, the nightcap featured the Gators heading to Knoxville to take on Tennessee. Tennessee with 6 turnovers in this game. Obviously, never really got into a rhythm of any sort. Tennessee takes it on the chin, 47-21 against Florida. Dan Mullen. Again, I don't think Florida's offense is quite where it needs to be yet. You give any team the ball on the 25-yard line, though, they're going to score. Any good team in the SEC is going to find a way to score. And when you shoot yourself in the foot over and over, 6 turnovers, a safety, fumbling the ball through the end zone on what would have been a big touchdown early in the second quarter. Jeremy Pruitt, Garantano, Vols offense just couldn't get it going Saturday night.
Yeah, and that's where I wonder if Dan Mullen, being a very experienced head coach, is able to get his system going faster, established faster at Florida than a Pruitt at Tennessee, he's never been a head coach. Is that right?
No,
never been a head coach. I would assume there's some learning curve there. I mean, it is what it is, but doesn't mean it won't happen. But I had to think during that game, I just felt like that there was some experience that was really paying off for Dan Mullen, just being a head coach and just being able to manage the team, manage the coaches, and have his system, have his system maybe a little more established, a little better than Pruitt was able to get so far at Tennessee, simply because it's his first time being a head coach. He's got to learn more. He doesn't get to hit the ground running quite as much. So
right.
I think we still haven't seen Tennessee. I think they're still working on things and learning the system, and Pruitt's probably got a lot of kinks to work out as far as just how he's going to approach things, because he's never been a head coach before. So he obviously had a good coach to learn from while he was at Alabama.
Right.
And I still think Tennessee is going to be a good program, but man, it's a lot to ask to go up against a very experienced head coach with a lot of talent to work with.
Well, I don't think there's any question either that Dan Mullen inherited a much better situation than Jeremy Pruitt has inherited at Tennessee. Tennessee Jeremy Pruitt having to inherit basically a read option offense with a mediocre offensive line
Yeah.
at best. And then when you try to change your style of ball to downhill running, smash mouth, big boy football with that offensive line, that's very hard to do.
And the transfers, right, away from Tennessee.
The transfers away from Tennessee, absolutely. I think another big thing in this game is how many times Jarrett Garantano gets hit, how many times he's knocked that to the ground, and he keeps getting back up. I think if I'm Jarrett Garantano, I'm probably in the face of some of my offensive line. Keep me off the ground.
Yeah, we've got a recruiting priority here at Tennessee.
4 weeks straight of him getting knocked to the ground. And Florida taking advantage of that. Florida's front seven, very good, very experienced, very deep. And, they feasted on Tennessee's offense multiple times Saturday night.
So with that option system that Tennessee had, I mean, it was a hybrid of a hybrid,
Right.
it seemed like to me. But the offensive line would, in theory, be smaller, right? Designed to be able to
Much
move
smaller.
quicker. So that's what they're trying to play more of a pro style type of offense, and that means that they're going to be having to stay there, protect the quarterback, a quarterback who's going to stay in the pocket. I mean, they're not built for that at all. So I would think Tennessee's really got to prioritize recruiting some offensive linemen and getting some bulk on some of those guys.
Well, you see some of these offensive lines like Alabama. You see LSU's offensive line, traditionally bigger guys, your 6'6", your 6'7" guys,
20, 40,
320, 330 pounds. Tennessee has nothing like that. Trey Smith, the one, big leader in his sophomore year now, had an illness in the offseason. He's still not back to 100%. Definitely tough times ahead for the rest of this year for Rocky Top. The next 3 games for Tennessee: at Georgia, at Auburn, at home against Alabama.
That may be the most difficult stretch I've heard of.
After
for
playing
this year.
Florida.
After playing Florida.
And then going to South Carolina after
So
that.
Florida, Georgia,
Auburn,
Alabama.
and then at South Carolina.
But there's opportunity here though, because on the
Plenty of opportunity. I
on the recruiting
can't.
trail,
Yes.
That's what I'm saying. On the recruiting trail, there are guys who Coach Pruitt can literally go up to and say, "Look, you could earn a starting job your
Immediately.
freshman year." Yes,
Immediately.
and so there is some upside to that, especially when you already figure he's rebuilding a program anyway.
Right.
So we could be looking at a couple years down the road some 5-star offensive line talent at Tennessee pushing around some other teams.
Right. So I think the key here for Tennessee in these next 3 games, obviously be competitive. Do the things you need to do to gain experience, gain the reps, and who knows, keep playing. Keep playing.
Mm-hmm.
You never know what's going to happen in the fourth quarter. Get through these next games healthy as best as they can, and then see what happens in the final 4 or 5 games.
Yeah,
Tennessee, I think, right now is looking right down the barrel of a 3-9 season, which would be the worst in school history after last year being 4-8. About the only game I think they're favored in from this point forward is the homecoming game in November against Charlotte. Charlotte, who did they beat week 1? Do you know?
Nebraska.
They did not beat Nebraska.
I don't even know who they played with.
Everyone else has. Charlotte, week 1, beats Old Dominion. Who did Old Dominion beat this past Saturday?
Virginia Tech.
At home against Virginia Tech. So obviously you can't, yes, that is concrete evidence that has happened. Just not a whole lot of wins right now on the horizon for Tennessee. They still got to play Kentucky. Still got to play Vanderbilt. The teams we've been talking about that are kind of catching the fire right now. The teams that nobody really wants to play right this minute. Saturday, I think you'll see a different approach for Tennessee. I just don't think you see another game where they turn the ball over 6 times. That's just not Tennessee football. Just not taking care of the ball, fumbling a kickoff, getting tackled for a safety in the end zone. Uncharacteristic things. Hopefully they get it out of their system, and that's a very tough task Saturday going to Georgia.
Yeah, Coach Pruitt has got to say to these guys, look, I don't expect us to go out and win every game in the next several games. What I do expect is for us to improve and feel that we've improved. And you can lose a game and still know that you've made improvement. And there's got to be a goal, though. There has to be something they're working toward, especially looking at the stretch that they're up against. And Coach Pruitt's also got to somehow, and obviously he wouldn't be the one to do it, but Tennessee fans have just got to know this is a building project here. I mean, they have really got to think like Butch wanted them to think in terms of brick by brick, because right now you don't have a wall. You've got to put some bricks on top of each other, and it's going to take some time. And goodness, college football fans, especially SEC fans, are the worst at expecting a coach to dominate right out of the gate.
Right.
And that's just way too tall of an order with what they have right now. But if they just focus on one play at a time as a team and trying to get better and improve, that's how they can look toward next year in the right way and improving the situation that they're in. But yeah, it's going to be an amazingly difficult stretch for Tennessee. I don't know that I've ever heard of as difficult of a lineup as what they're facing. I mean, that's just, let's try this one more time. Georgia,
Auburn,
Alabama, and then
South
Carolina.
Just after coming after Florida.
Wow, that's tough.
The gauntlet. And that's our recap of the games from this weekend. Obviously, a lot to look forward to this weekend. Let's do some picks.
Let's do some picks.
All right. We'll start right now with the 11 o'clock games this weekend. Louisiana heads to Tuscaloosa. Alabama was favored by 50 at the beginning of the week, now down to 48.
Now, which Louisiana is this? Just
This
so
is
everybody's
Louisiana
clear.
Lafayette, not Louisiana Monroe. This is
There we
Louisiana Lafayette. Alabama big. I mean, 48 and a half. I can't believe that team is favored by that much.
And you told me earlier you didn't think you'd ever seen a spread of 50. As it
I'm
was
sure
a few
there's
days ago.
been one, an Ohio State, an Oklahoma, and Alabama against a Division II team, Charleston Southern, that Alabama played several years ago.
Maybe Southern California a few years ago.
Something like that. Yeah, I just don't know if I've ever actually seen a spread of 50 points or better. So, Alabama big in this game. I say both quarterbacks. We're 4 games in at this point. The new NCAA rule with the red shirting. Do we see both quarterbacks?
Well, that's still a mystery. If Jalen is going to transfer, if he's going to stay, and then he'll have 2 years. If Tua was to leave early, as is already expected, then he could stay and he could be a starter for 2 years and have NFL prospects himself. But is he that patient? And
Right.
is he going to risk what's behind him, probably what's going to be coming into Alabama recruiting-wise? But we're going to know this weekend if Jalen's redshirting or what he's going to do.
Right.
So do you want to predict a little bit on that? What do you think Jalen's going to do?
I think Jalen's going to stay at this point. Personally, I think he's committed to Alabama. He's got so much invested, and Alabama playing in 2 national championships. I just don't see him being. I don't think he's a selfish player at all. Obviously, these kids that get to college, they want to play. They're at the major universities. They want to play. He's one though who's been a leader in every way possible. I don't see him abandoning his team like that. Now he could surprise me, but I just don't think he's that kind of guy at all.
I agree, and I think that Coach Saban thinks he's leaning towards staying as well, or else he wouldn't be getting so many reps. If Saban thought he was transferring, I imagine that he would have number 3 in as number 2, getting some quality reps that can be used for experience going forward. So I think that just based on what we've seen, that Coach Saban thinks he's going to stay as well, or else why do you play him that much if you think he's transferring? So I think he's going to stay. And here's the other thing though: could he redshirt and stay?
At this point, yes.
So I mean, just because he redshirts doesn't mean he's going to transfer.
Correct.
Yeah. So we'll see this weekend what the word is from the Wizards of Smart on football. They're not self-proclaimed geniuses, but they do know a thing or two here and there. The ESPNs and whatnot.
Right. The other 11 o'clock game has Arkansas traveling to Texas A&M. Can the Hogs try to find something to put together on offense?
Oh, they're
Do
going to
they
try.
have anything for Texas A&M?
No, I think A&M is gonna roll some of their own. I think that's payback for what Alabama did to A&M, and I think they're going to get a lot done against Arkansas. And Arkansas just has nothing going.
A&M currently a 21-point favorite. Does A&M cover?
I think they'll cover. I think A&M is going to beat them by more than that. I think it'll be more like 28-30.
Right. I do. I agree as well. The afternoon games, Tennessee heads to Between the Hedges to take on Georgia. Tennessee obviously still trying to find itself. The Dogs currently a 31-point favorite. That's just so tough for me as a fan to pick against that spread. I do think Georgia wins the game. I think they win it pretty handily. Tennessee's been fairly good against the run so far this year. I think a lot of it is going to be, can Tennessee not turn the football over and give Georgia a short field? Can they make them go 70 and 80 yards in order to score? And if so, then we know who the better team is. But Tennessee cannot shoot itself in the foot, fall down 14 points early like it did to Florida. I think Tennessee can be more competitive in this game. They're going to have to try to find a way to protect Jarrett Garantano. Mm-hmm. If they can do that, this could be the first stepping stone towards the direction that they need to go offensively. Georgia just way too much on offense, though.
Yeah, and I think it's going to all start with the Georgia defensive line pushing around that offensive line of Tennessee. I think Georgia's going to be able to penetrate. I think there's going to be lots of sacks, and it's going to be a long day for Tennessee. I would love it if that wasn't the case, but I just think that if we're talking math here and probability, that the D-line's going to push around the O-line. It's going to be a long day for Tennessee.
31 points, the current spread. Mm-hmm. Do you think Georgia covers?
No.
Kind of the same mindset.
I think it'll be very close.
Not trying to be a biased point of view, obviously. I think if they don't shoot themselves in the foot, if they don't turn the football over and leave Georgia with a short field, especially with that offense, with that offensive line, with those trio of running backs that they have, McCole Hardman at receiver, you just can't give a team like that a short field. They've also got an incredible kicker. So, obviously, you don't want to give them a short field.
Yeah, and I think with Tennessee now playing for pride, just playing, they don't want to look bad. They want to show people that they can go out and they can compete and that they're not going to give up. And I think that Coach Pruitt is going to be preaching that as well. You go out and you show people in the face of what's going on, in adversity, that you're going to go out there and you're going to keep fighting. And I think that's going to be what they're going to do. So I do think that they'll cover, but it's going to be too much Georgia just from a leverage standpoint on the field. But I don't think that they're going to win by, what did you say the spread was? 31. I think it's more like 24.
Okay.
I think that Tennessee should be, I hate to say this, but I think if they are able to prevent Georgia from covering the spread, I think Tennessee should be pleased with themselves because Georgia is sensational, obviously.
Right. Number two or three team in the country. Southern Miss makes the trip north to Jordan-Hare to take on Auburn on the Plains. Auburn currently a 26.5-point favorite. Interestingly enough, Auburn's favored by more against Arkansas, not as much against Southern Miss. Southern Miss a 2-1 record. Auburn a 3-1 record. What do you think happens?
I think that that's right. The more that I've thought about it, Arkansas is just so down this year. And I think that's part of the reason. And Southern Miss has traditionally played SEC teams tough. I mean, very tough. So it'll be interesting to see. I don't think Auburn's going to cover. I don't think that they're going to be able to do it by that amount. I think it's going to be a 21-point win, 17-21.
Auburn wins at the same time, though, starting SEC play and everything. Auburn gets a lot of guys in this game. Don't take a chance of getting anybody hurt. I think a lot of guys play late. Southern Miss may score a touchdown late to make it look closer. I think Auburn big, though. Moving on, Tennessee State, Vanderbilt take on each other. Campuses are separated by just a couple of miles. Vandy big. Vandy is looking to get the taste out of their mouth after the South Carolina game. Kyle Shermer, Kalijah Lipscomb, big day. I think Vandy's defense, you could see a block punt in this game. You could see Vandy's defense score at least once. I think Vandy rolls pretty big over TSU.
I do too. I think that's an easy one.
Yep.
Little trivia.
Okay.
Fun fact here. Tennessee State recruited one of us to play golf for them. Full scholarship. Who was it? The world may never know. Moving right along.
Heading into the evening game Saturday night, this is a big matchup. Dan Mullen heads back to Starkville with his Gators to take on Mississippi State. Mississippi State currently a 7-point favorite. Your pick.
Now, you had an interesting answer for a question I asked you earlier when I said, what do you think the welcome is going to be like for Dan Mullen back at Mississippi State? I do pick Dan Mullen, and I think that. What'd you say the spread was?
7.
I think it'll be. I think he'll win by more than that. I think it'll be more like a 17-point win.
4
Florida.
for Florida. Going
Yeah.
with Florida.
But the question, what do you think the welcome will be like for Dan Mullen going back to Mississippi State?
I do think you're gonna hear boos.
Yeah.
There's no question there.
And why was that? You had an answer.
Drunk fans.
Drunk fans, okay.
Drunk fans. You know, you have a stadium full of that many fans and everything. You can't expect everybody to be
Sober.
cheering and sober and that too. I think the serious Mississippi State fans know how far Dan Mullen brought them in such a short time. The players he was able to get to come to Starkville, Mississippi.
Number 1 ranking.
Number 1 ranking at one point. I think a lot of people have to keep in mind. A lot of people have never been to towns like Starkville, Mississippi, to Norman, Oklahoma, to Auburn, Alabama. Okay, these are just small little country towns. Okay, not a whole lot going on. A lot of these 18, 21-year-olds, they want the party life, right? They want the college party life. Not a whole lot going on at those. To still be able to get some of these big time players to come play there, and just how good of a developer Dan Mullen is. I mean, we have talked about that. What he did with Dak Prescott, absolutely amazing. What's Dak Prescott doing currently? Making millions. As far as this game goes, I'm gonna pull a Corso. Not so fast. Okay, I think Mississippi State. They were embarrassed last weekend at Kentucky. You get back home in the SEC. There's always something for the SEC at home at night. The cowbells, the atmosphere, that's going to be electric Saturday night. Nick Fitzgerald, I think Florida has a tough time stopping him with the run-pass option. At some point, he can air it out to those good receivers. Good running back at Mississippi State. I think Mississippi State wins a close game at home.
Oh, okay. So we are opposed.
We are opposed. I think the battle of the first-year coaches, I think Joe Moorhead gets the first win of this series.
All right, I guess we're gonna see. I gotta take some notes here.
South Carolina heads to the Commonwealth in Kentucky to take on the undefeated Kentucky Wildcats at 4-0.
You said it. It's on tape.
It's on tape. The undefeated Kentucky
So
Wildcats.
I asked earlier, and I'm gonna ask you now: are we gonna see 5-0 Kentucky after this weekend?
Me personally, yes. Kentucky are currently 1-point favorite, basically a straight-up pick'em game. Kentucky, again, has the ability for Benny Snell, he can look across at the defensive line, at the linebackers, and tell him, hey, I'm running through that gap with this ball right now. Stop me if you can. That's what Kentucky has shown this year, that they are committed to their game plan. What is their game plan? Getting 26 the ball. Benny Snell, huge game, close win. Kentucky wins.
I also picked Kentucky, and it's going to be fun to say 5-0 Kentucky. And like I said, I believe last week, I think now Kentucky believes in Kentucky, and Kentucky takes themselves seriously. It's not just that other people are starting to take Kentucky seriously, but I think those players are starting to take themselves seriously, and I think they're going to take somebody else really seriously this weekend in a different kind of way. See what I did there?
Totally agree. I like that. Boy, those acting skills are paying off.
They really
That's
are.
really
worth
good.
every dime.
Ole Miss making the trip to Death Valley to take on the LSU Tigers. At night in the SEC at Death Valley. Not sure there's a better atmosphere.
Is that your game of the week?
I'm going to say it's the game of the week. Why not?
I like that. Let's say that's the game of the week. Yeah, and a lot of people are beginning to talk about LSU as though they are Alabama light. We talked about this a little bit. They mirror Alabama, a lot of what they're trying to do. The pro-style focus, we're just going to try to beat you at every single position. Not a lot of trickery, not misdirection, though we do have Tua Tagovailoa. Don't you say it again?
Tagovailoa.
Running some little run-pass option stuff here and there. We're calling that an RPO now. And so Alabama is doing some of that, but that's just really when you are very confident in your decision maker. But I'm hearing LSU is Alabama light. And so going up against Ole Miss, a lot of people are assuming the same type of results. But as you and I were talking about, this is a really interesting game because we know Ole Miss can score. LSU, a little sputtering here and there with the offense. And I just don't know that they're going to be able to outscore LSU like they need to. They're really going to have to rely on their defense to stop Ole Miss. It's going to be a really interesting game. Probably the one that I'm most excited about watching as a passive, neutral observer. Who do you pick?
I'm going with LSU in a very close game. I think this game is way closer than everybody thinks. Ole Miss has got something for LSU just about every year. Ole Miss's receivers, great receivers, a good quarterback, pretty good offensive line. LSU is going to have to come up with a lot of blitz options to confuse the young quarterback. LSU, I think, will do enough of that. This could be a very low-scoring game, especially at halftime. This could be in the single digits. It could also be 14-14. It could be 21-21. I just see it being a lower-scoring game to start. Both teams might catch a little fire in the second half, kind of seeing what each side has been able to come up with in the first half. They make necessary adjustments at halftime. I think LSU comes out with a very close win. Part of me wants to pick Ole Miss. I kid you not. I like the young quarterback. I like Matt Luke a lot. But Death Valley, the crowd is involved. The crowd helps it.
And Orgeron helps, right? Orgeron playing his old boss, right?
Yeah.
Playing his old boss. And he gave LSU some fits at Ole Miss.
He did.
I believe. A lot of tough games against LSU, but it seemed to work out the same way I think it's going to work out. LSU was on top.
Now, I want to back up for a minute what you were saying about, they're kind of being compared to Alabama and everything. I think the reason they're getting the most talk right now, they're proving all the critics wrong.
Mm-hmm.
All the critics that said, you can't pass. You don't have a quarterback. Your running game's solid every year, but you haven't had a quarterback. You haven't been able to develop a quarterback. Against Auburn 2 weeks ago, I think we found that LSU's got a quarterback now.
Yeah.
So what they take and do with that at this point, obviously they just keep moving up in the standings, top 5 now. So and I don't think they get a big head with that at all. They've earned their way into that. It's not like teams ahead of them lost and they've just moved up the way. They have earned their spot right where they are, and I think they're going to continue with that mindset. I'm just out to prove everybody wrong at this point. Orgeron, obviously, very motivated coach. We didn't talk about this last week. When they made the kick to beat Auburn, Orgeron is this far away from that police officer. And I have no idea what he said, but boy, did it look intense. And that police officer was right back up in his face, too. So obviously, a lot of intensity from that guy. He loves what he does. He'll have his team ready to play Saturday night.
And that police officer loved what he was doing, too. He's obviously an Ole Miss fan. Yeah, I do agree. LSU walks away with a win here. Another win for Coach O, I believe. So be sure to hit the subscribe button below so you can be notified when we have other videos about football by a couple of self-proclaimed geniuses. And hit the like button, share with your friends, and let us know if you'd like us to cover different games, if you'd like us to talk about some other situations at some other universities, or if you think we're not talking about your team enough, or if you disagree and you're tired of us picking against your team. Let us know. This is Lee.
And I'm Brandon.
And this has been That's What He Said. I hope your team wins this week as long as they're not playing against Alabama.
Peace.